My daughter-in-law took everything I had until this grandma took it all back without a word. The funeral flowers had long since wilted, but Rebecca was still rearranging my life. "Mum, you can't possibly maintain this big house alone," she said, her voice carrying that practiced tone of concern I'd grown to recognize. She stood in my kitchen, the kitchen where I'd hosted every Christmas, every birthday, every family gathering for 37 years, holding a clipboard like she was conducting business. My son David nodded from his seat at the table, not quite meeting my eyes. "The maintenance alone must be overwhelming, Ma. And all these stairs." I watched them both carefully. Rebecca's manicured fingers tapped against the clipboard, her wedding ring catching the afternoon light. The same ring I'd helped David buy when he was 23 and desperately in love. The same ring that had once symbolized hope. "I've been managing just fine," I said quietly. "But for how long?" Rebecca's eyebrows knitted together in that expression of manufactured worry. "What happens when you fall? When you can't reach the top shelves? When winter comes and you can't shovel the driveway?" I'd been shoveling that driveway for 4 decades. Harold used to tease me about it, said I was too stubborn to wait for him to get home from work. But Rebecca didn't know that. She'd never asked about Harold, never asked about our life together, never asked about anything that happened before she arrived. "The assisted living facility I found has a waiting list," she continued, "but I pulled some strings. They can take you next month." Asterisk. Next month. As if my entire life could be packed and scheduled around her convenience. "I haven't agreed to anything," I said. David finally looked up. "Mum, we're just trying to help. You know we worry about you." Asterisk we. Asterisk. When had David started speaking in plurals? When had his voice become an echo of hers? "I'm sure you'll love it there," Rebecca pressed on. "There are activities, people your own age. You won't be so isolated." Isolated. The word hung in the air like smoke. I wasn't isolated. I was alone by choice, by grief, by the simple fact that the person I'd shared everything with for 43 years was gone. But to Rebecca, my solitude was a problem to be solved, an inconvenience to be managed. "And the house?" I asked. "Well, obviously it would need to be sold, to pay for your care." She said it so smoothly, as if she'd rehearsed this part. "David and I have been looking at the market values. With some updates, we could get a really good price." I sat back in my chair, the weight of understanding settling on my shoulders. This wasn't about my safety or my well-being. This was about the house. My house. Harold's house. The house we'd bought with our wedding money and a prayer. "I need time to think about it," I said. Rebecca's smile faltered slightly. "Of course. But we really shouldn't wait too long. These facilities fill up quickly and winter is coming." Always the urgency. Always the pressure wrapped in care. After they left, I sat in the living room where Harold and I used to watch the evening news together. The house felt different now. Not empty, but somehow under siege. I could feel their expectations pressing against the walls, their plans creeping through the spaces like cold air through old windows. I picked up the phone and dialed Margaret's number. She answered on the second ring. "Eleanor, how are you holding up, dear?" Margaret had been my neighbour for 25 years, had stood beside me at Harold's funeral, had brought casseroles and comfort in equal measure. She was the kind of friend who knew when to speak and when to simply sit. "Margaret, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Of course." "Do you think I'm losing my mind? Do you think I can't manage on my own?" There was a pause, and I heard her moving around her kitchen, probably making tea. "Eleanor, you're sharper than most people half your age. You've been managing that house, your finances, your garden, everything. without missing a beat. "Why are you asking?" I told her about the conversation with David and Rebecca, about the assisted living facility, about the plans that had been made without consulting me. Margaret listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of disapproval. "Oh, honey," she said finally, "they're trying to buffalo you. Buffalo me. Pressure you into something you don't want by making you think you don't have a choice." My sister went through the same thing with her daughter-in-law. Started with concerns about safety, ended with them living in her house while she lived in a one-bedroom apartment. I closed my eyes. "What did your sister do?" "Nothing, unfortunately. She let them convince her she was being a burden. Died 2 years later, miserable and broke." That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house, really looking at it for the first time in months. The living room where David had taken his first steps. The kitchen where I'd taught him to make pancakes. The basement, where Harold had built him a train set that took up half the space. Every room held memories, but they also held something else. Decisions. Choices Harold and I had made together. Problems we'd solved. Dreams we'd built brick by brick. This wasn't just a house, it was the physical manifestation of our life together. And Rebecca wanted to sell it to pay for locking me away. I went to Harold's desk in the study, the one place in the house that Rebecca had never reorganized or updated. His papers were still there, organized in his careful handwriting, insurance policies, investment statements, the deed to the house. The deed. I pulled it out and read it carefully. The house was in my name alone now, had been since Harold's death. Rebecca couldn't sell it without my signature, couldn't force me to do anything. But she could make my life difficult. She could turn David against me, could make me feel like a burden, could slowly erode my confidence until I gave in. Unless I didn't let her. The next morning, I called my lawyer. James Brennan had handled our estate planning, had been at Harold's funeral, had known us both for years. He agreed to see me that afternoon. "Eleanor, what can I do for you?" I told him about Rebecca's plan, about the assisted living facility, about the pressure to sell the house. James listened with the same careful attention he'd always given Harold and me. "Do you want to sell the house?" "No." "Do you want to move to assisted living?" "No." "Do you need to do either of those things?" I thought about it carefully. "No." "Then let's make sure you don't have to." He pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. "I'm going to draft some documents that will protect your interests. Power of attorney specifications, healthcare directives, property protections. Nothing that will keep your family from being involved in your life, but everything that will keep them from making decisions for you." "What about David?" James's expression softened. "Eleanor, David is your son, and I know you love him. But love doesn't mean letting someone make choices that aren't in your best interest, even if they think they are." I left his office feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Powerful. Not angry, not defiant, just clear. The documents were ready within a week. I read them carefully, asked questions, made sure I understood every word. Then I signed them, each signature feeling like a small act of reclamation. I didn't tell David and Rebecca about the lawyer. I didn't announce my decision or make a dramatic speech. Instead, I simply started living differently. When Rebecca called to check on me, I was polite but brief. When she mentioned the assisted living facility, I said I was still thinking about it. When she asked about getting contractors to look at the house, I said I wasn't ready yet. I could hear her frustration growing with each conversation, but I kept my voice steady, my responses measured. I had learned something important. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply say no without explanation. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. I was in the garden, harvesting the last of the tomatoes before the first frost, when I heard voices from the side yard. Rebecca and David were there with a man I didn't recognize, pointing at the house, talking about updating the kitchen and opening up the living room. They were planning renovations to my house without asking me. I stood there, hidden by the tomato plants, listening to them discuss my life like I wasn't living it. The man was apparently a contractor, and he was giving them estimates for changes that would increase market value. The old lady might resist some of these changes, the contractor said. They usually do. She's not thinking clearly, Rebecca replied. Her son has to make hard decisions now. I felt something shift inside me, like a door closing. Not slamming, just closing, quietly and finally. That evening I called David. "Hi, Ma. How are you feeling?" "I'm fine, David. I'm calling to let you know that I won't be selling the house." Silence. Then, "Ma, we talked about this. It's not safe for you to... I'm not moving to assisted living either." "Mum, you're not thinking clearly. The stress of losing Dad, the isolation..." "I'm thinking very clearly, David. More clearly than I have in months. Look, Rebecca and I have been doing research. We know what's best for you. You have to trust us." "I don't have to do anything, David. This is my house, my life, my decision." His voice took on Rebecca's tone, that practiced patience. "Mom, we're just trying to help. Why are you being so stubborn?" "I'm not being stubborn. I'm being clear. I'm staying in my house. I'm not moving to assisted living. And I'm not selling anything." "This is ridiculous. You can't just..." "Yes, I can. And I am." I hung up before he could respond. The next morning, I was in the garden again when they arrived, both of them with the contractor in tow. Rebecca's face was tight with anger, David's with confusion. "Mum, we need to talk," David said. "No, we don't." I kept working, pulling weeds from around the roses. "I told you my decision last night." "This is absurd," Rebecca snapped. "You can't live alone indefinitely. You're being selfish." I looked up at her then, really looked at her. She was beautiful in her fury, righteous in her conviction that she knew what was best for me. But there was something else in her eyes. Disappointment. Not concern, not love, but disappointment that I wasn't cooperating with her plan. "Selfish," I repeated. "Interesting word choice." "You're thinking only about yourself," she continued. "Not about David, not about what this is doing to our family. He's worried sick about you." I stood up, brushing dirt off my gloves. "David, are you worried sick about me?" He looked uncomfortable, caught between his wife and his mother. I want you to be safe, Ma." "I am safe. I'm healthy. I'm competent. And I'm happy. What I'm not is compliant." Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "You're making this much harder than it needs to be." "I'm not making this anything, Rebecca. I'm living my life." "You're being ridiculous. The house is too big. The maintenance is too much. You're too old to manage all this alone." "According to whom?" She gestured wildly at the house, the garden, the space around us. "According to common sense. According to reality." "Whose reality?" The contractor cleared his throat. "Maybe I should come back another time." "No," Rebecca said sharply. "Stay. She needs to hear this." She turned back to me. "Eleanor, you can't keep living in the past. Harold is gone. This house is just a burden now. You need to accept that and move on." The words hit me like a physical blow. Not because they were cruel, but because they revealed so much about how she saw me, how she saw my life with Harold. how she saw everything I valued. "This house isn't a burden," I said quietly. "It's my home. It's where I raised my son, where I loved my husband, where I built my life. It's not the past. It's the foundation of who I am." "That's exactly the problem," Rebecca said. "You're stuck in the past instead of embracing the future." "What future? The one where I'm tucked away in a facility while you sell my house and spend my money? That future?" David stepped forward. "Mom, that's not—" "It's exactly what it is, David, and you know it." I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, this boy who'd once promised to take care of me when I got old. He was 42 now, successful, married, apparently happy. But standing there, caught between his wife's ambition and his mother's resistance, he looked like a stranger. "I'm not moving," I said. "I'm not selling. I'm not changing my life to accommodate your plans." "You're being impossible," Rebecca said. "I'm being myself. Maybe that's the problem." That night, after they left, I sat in Harold's chair and tried to remember when things had changed, when David had stopped being my son and started being Rebecca's husband, when his voice had become an echo of hers, when his concerns had become her agenda. I thought about the years since Harold's death, about the slow erosion of my independence. It hadn't happened all at once. It had been gradual, subtle, like water wearing away stone. A comment here about my driving, a suggestion there about my housekeeping. Offers to help that gradually became expectations, then demands. But I was still here, still capable, still me. The phone rang. Margaret. "How did it go today, dear?" "They brought a contractor." "Oh, Eleanor. They want to renovate the house to increase its market value. They're planning to sell it whether I agree or not." "Can they do that?" "Not legally, but they can make my life miserable until I give in." Margaret was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to stop them." "How?" I looked around the living room, at the photographs on the mantel, at the books on the shelves, at the life Harold and I had built together. "I'm going to make it impossible for them to take this away from me." The next morning, I went back to James Brennan's office. This time, I had a plan. "Eleanor, what can I do for you?" "I want to set up a trust. I want to transfer the house into it, along with enough money to maintain it. I want to make sure that no one can force me to sell it or move out of it." "That's certainly possible. What about your other assets?" "I want to protect those too. I want to make sure that if something happens to me, my wishes are honored, not overridden by someone else's idea of what's best for me." James made notes, asked questions, explained options. By the end of the meeting, we had a plan that would protect my house, my money, and my choices. The trust would be irrevocable. Even I couldn't change it once it was established. But it would ensure that I could live in my house for the rest of my life, that it would be maintained, that no one could force me to leave. "Eleanor, are you sure about this? Once these documents are signed, there's no going back. I'm sure. What about David? What about including him in these decisions?" I thought about it carefully. "James, I love my son, but he's not making decisions based on what's best for me. He's making them based on what's easiest for him and what his wife wants. I need to protect myself from that, even if it means potentially damaging your relationship with him." "My relationship with him is already damaged. This is just me acknowledging that." The papers were ready within 2 weeks. I signed them on a Thursday morning, with James and 2 witnesses present. Each signature felt like a small victory, a quiet declaration of independence. I didn't tell David and Rebecca about the trust. I didn't announce my decision or send them copies of the documents. I simply went home and continued living my life. But I did make one change. I started saying no. When Rebecca called to schedule another visit with the contractor, I said no. When David asked if he could have copies of my financial statements, I said no. When Rebecca suggested I should consider hiring a housekeeper because maintaining this big house is too much work, I said no. Each time I was polite but firm. I didn't explain or justify or apologize. I just said no. The pressure increased. Phone calls became more frequent, visits more tense. Rebecca's suggestions became demands. David's concerns became accusations. But I held firm. "Mum, you're being unreasonable," David said during one particularly heated conversation. "We're just trying to help." "I don't need that kind of help." "You need some kind of help. You can't do everything yourself." "I'm not doing everything myself. I have Margaret, I have James, I have the people at the grocery store and the bank and the doctor's office. I have a community." "That's not the same as family." "You're right. It's better. They support my choices instead of trying to override them." Rebecca, who had been silent up to that point, finally spoke. "Eleanor, you're being selfish and stubborn. You're making this harder on everyone." "I'm making what harder?" "This whole situation. Your refusal to accept help. Your insistence on staying in this house that's too big for you. Your resistance to making sensible decisions about your future." "My future is none of your business, Rebecca. It is when it affects my husband, when it affects our family." "How does my living in my own house affect your family?" She was quiet for a moment, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Frustration, anger, maybe even a little fear. "You're going to fall down those stairs one day. You're going to get sick or hurt or confused. And then what? Then David and I will have to deal with the crisis. We'll have to make the decisions you should have made yourself. You don't have to deal with anything. You choose to. He's my husband. You're his mother. Of course I have to deal with it." "No, you don't. You could mind your own business. You could let me live my life and make my own decisions. You could support David in supporting me instead of pushing him to control me." David stood up abruptly. "That's enough. Mum, we're trying to help you. Why can't you see that?" "Because I don't need the kind of help you're offering." "What kind of help do you need?" I thought about it for a moment. "I need you to trust me. I need you to respect my choices. I need you to visit me because you want to see me, not because you're checking up on me. I need you to remember that I'm still your mother, not your obligation." "Of course you're my mother. That's why—" "No, David. You're treating me like a problem to be solved, not a person to be loved." The room fell silent. I could see the hurt in David's eyes, the anger in Rebecca's. But I also saw something else. Recognition. They knew I was right, even if they couldn't admit it. "I think you should go," I said quietly. "Mum, I think you should go, and I think you should decide what kind of relationship you want with me, because the one we have now isn't working." They left without another word. I watched from the window as they sat in their car for a long time, talking intensely. Rebecca was gesturing. David was shaking his head. Finally, they drove away. I didn't hear from them for 3 weeks. At first I was hurt, then I was worried, then I was angry. But gradually I realized something. I was also relieved. For the first time in months, I could live my life without feeling like I was being watched, judged, managed. I started gardening again, really gardening. I planned new flower beds, ordered bulbs for spring, spent hours working in the soil. I cooked elaborate meals just for myself, tried new recipes, invited Margaret over for dinner. I read books I'd been meaning to read, watched movies Harold and I had never gotten around to seeing. I took long walks through the neighborhood, reconnected with old friends, joined a book club at the library. I was living, not just surviving. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. David's voice was different, smaller somehow. "Mum, can we talk?" "Of course." "I've been thinking about what you said, about treating you like a problem instead of a person. And I think you're right. I think I've been so worried about what might happen to you that I stopped seeing what was actually happening with you." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're fine. You're more than fine. You're happy. You're healthy. You're living your life the way you want to live it. And I've been trying to fix something that wasn't broken." I sat down, feeling a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying lift from my shoulders. "I'm sorry, Mum. I'm sorry for not listening to you. I'm sorry for making you feel like you had to defend your choices. I'm sorry for forgetting that you're still you." "Thank you," I said quietly. Can I come see you? Just me. I'd like to visit my mother, not check up on my obligation. I'd like that." He came the next day, alone. We sat in the garden, drinking tea and talking about things we hadn't discussed in years. Harold, memories of David's childhood, plans for the future. He told me about his work, his friends, his dreams. I told him about my book club, my garden, my contentment. "Are you happy, Mum?" "Yes. Are you?" He thought about it for a moment. "I'm getting there." "What about Rebecca?" His expression clouded slightly. She's having a hard time understanding why you won't accept our help." "Your help? Or her plan?" "I'm starting to see the difference." "Good." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the late afternoon sun slant through the trees. Finally, David spoke. "Mum, I want you to know that I support whatever you decide. About the house, about your future, about everything. I want to be part of your life, but I don't want to run it. I want you to be part of my life too." "What about Rebecca?" I thought about it carefully. "I don't know, David. I hope we can find a way to be civil, to coexist. But I won't be controlled by her, and I won't pretend to be grateful for unwanted help. I understand." "Do you? Do you really?" He nodded. "I'm learning to." That evening, after David left, I sat in Harold's chair and thought about the conversation. It wasn't a complete resolution. There were still issues to work through, relationships to repair. But it was a beginning. I thought about the trust I'd established, the legal protections I'd put in place. I didn't regret them, but I hoped I'd never need to use them. I hoped that David and I could build a relationship based on mutual respect rather than legal safeguards. The phone rang. "Margaret." "How did it go, dear?" "Better than I expected." "And Rebecca?" "That remains to be seen." "Are you worried?" I looked around the living room, at the life Harold and I had built together, at the home I'd fought to keep. "No, I'm not worried anymore." "Good. You shouldn't be. You've handled this beautifully." "I've handled it the only way I could, by being honest about what I needed and refusing to accept less. That's not easy for people like us." "No, it's not. We're taught to be accommodating, to put others' needs before our own, but sometimes that's not kindness, it's just enabling." "Your Harold would be proud of you." I smiled, touching the wedding ring I still wore. "I think he would. He always said I was stronger than I knew." He was right. After I hung up, I walked through the house, turning off lights, checking locks, settling in for the night. But before I went to bed, I stopped in the kitchen and looked out at the garden. The tomatoes were finished now, the summer flowers fading into autumn colors. But the bones of the garden remained. the structure Harold and I had built together, the foundation that would support new growth when spring came. I thought about the conversation with David, about the possibility of rebuilding our relationship. I thought about Rebecca, about whether she would ever accept my independence. I thought about the trust, about the legal protections that would ensure my choices were honored. But mostly I thought about the quiet satisfaction of standing my ground, of saying no when no was the right answer, of choosing my own path, even when others thought they knew better. I was 73 years old. I was a widow, a mother, a grandmother. I was also a woman who had learned, perhaps later than she should have, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be diminished by other people's fears. The house was quiet around me, but it wasn't empty. It was full of memories, full of choices, full of the life I'd built and the life I was still building. It was mine, in every sense of the word. And that was enough. That night, I slept better than I had in months. In the morning, I would plant tulip bulbs for spring, call the book club about next month's selection, maybe invite Margaret over for dinner. I would live my life, on my terms, in my own house, surrounded by the things and people I chose to surround myself with. I would be happy. And if that seemed selfish to some people, well, I was finally old enough not to care.